Hey, Nation, back with another one of our podcasts. Aaron Warner over at ProCircular in Iowa City, Iowa. Did I get that right?
That's right. It is home of the fourth largest teaching hospital in the world, and the University of Iowa, among other things.
All right. Well, sir, what's your story? I'm looking at the LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile, and you have a long career in tech, and it looks like us in with a bias towards security. Briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah. So Harry, my name's Aaron Warner. I spent quite a bit of time in biotech. I spent 22 years working in life sciences for a company that manufactured custom DNA and RNA and synthetic genes. It was like a buffet if you're a nerd. So if you're into everything, if you're into engineering and chemistry and computer science and just the advancement of technology, it was a wonderful place to work. I helped to build that company, and then this cybersecurity became more and more a part of my job as a CIO. And I couldn't find somebody to help me out. I could find really big companies that were happy to hit me for $750,000 for an assessment. And I could find little tiny companies that could sell me a thing, but I couldn't really find a good Sherpa in cybersecurity. So I did what a lot of people do. I couldn't find it. I started it as a company, and it's been about, our firm started in 2016. So just before all of this election stuff. And it's been a wild ride. Just the last 5 years has been, it's been interesting for sure, but it's been a lot more than I originally signed on for. But fascinating. Every single day I learn something new. I learn a bunch of new things. And
let's talk about that. What's news? Lay one or two things down on me as we sit here today and approaching the March 9th. Full disclosure, folks, you'll probably see this a couple days after that date. But as we sit here at March 9th, clearly the world's changed rapidly yet again. What's news?
Well, you can't really have this conversation today without talking about Ukraine a little bit. Things are really unsettled in Europe right now. There's some kind of horrible things happening there from a security or cybersecurity perspective. To a certain degree, it's a little bit like a hornet's nest has been kicked. There's a lot of activity. There are all kinds of tools being thrown back and forth. In fact, just one example, we got a look at some malware that a group called Conti had been using. They're a really bad threat actor. And I mean bad. Like when all of the other hackers in Europe said, we're not going to attack hospitals during COVID, they said, yeah, forget that. We're going to attack hospitals. We don't care. So these guys have a bad reputation amongst a whole group of people who already have kind of bad reputation. Some of the specific lines of code within that software were called 403 Biden White House, which is sort of hacker code for keep Biden out of the White House, that Biden is forbidden from the White House. But those tools were deployed last week. So what we think it was an indication of is that a lot of the tools that had been used in the last election and presumably the election before that one that were pointed at the United States have now been pointed at Ukraine and probably some other victims within Europe. Honestly, our incident response business is a little slower than we normally see, and frankly, a lot slower than what we expected. That is, this is conjecture, but we spent a lot of time on this subject. We think that it's because there is a lot of infighting in Ukraine and in Europe and in Russia right now. And frankly, a lot of the hacker groups that have to maintain sort of a friendly relationship with Putin's regime in order to continue to exist and get away with what they're doing, they aren't sure who's going to be in charge on the other side of this. So I think there's a lot of waiting and seeing going on. And I mean, if there's a silver lining to any of this, it's that at least today, 3/9 of 2022, incidents in the United States are actually down a little bit. Not to be the doomsday guy, but I think what a lot of us expect to happen is that once things have settled out, or at least the future is a little more clear, one way or the other, we'll see. I think we're all expecting an increase in attacks, mostly because that's the least expensive and probably most effective form of recourse that Russia has. It's a weapon that they can use and get away with. It can be difficult to attribute some of those attacks to them. And it doesn't really cost a lot to launch one of those attacks. So I suspect a lot of us in industry, I really hope that that isn't the case, that things go back to normal, or maybe quieter than before when it comes to incidents, ransomware and hacking incidents. But I think a lot of us are kind of watching our clocks and saying, well, so maybe it's next week.
Well, here's what I did a couple of weekends ago. I guess 60 Minutes kind of scared the bejesus out of me again, as they tend to do. Great show though, love it. And I looked over my security stack here at SMB Nation. Right, just took a fresh look. Trust me, we got backups, we got this, we got that. But I took a fresh look, and I went ahead and purchased the 5 annual licenses over at PCmatic. I said, I'm coming up on the end of a relationship with another antivirus thing. I don't want to renew. And my friend and yours over at PCmatic, I went ahead and rolled with it. And part of it was here's my thinking. And I'm not an isolationist. I'm not a big nationalist, but part of my thinking was compared to what I'd been using with some Eastern European roots, PCmatic is truly American based, and it's like, I'm just roll with them, and let's give them a year, and then we'll give them 2, and then we'll give them 3. Any thoughts on that?
Full disclosure, we don't sell, for the most part, we don't sell products. We don't sell endpoint like PCmatic, but that said, I know that team really well. I've met Rob Chung many times, and our friend in common is I think sees the world through the right lens, and I think you're right to have some concerns when it comes to who's monitoring your endpoints, who's writing the software that monitors those endpoints, because there are lots of opportunities to introduce backdoors when you author a piece of software, and it's not conspiratorial at all. If you look at what happened with Huawei, the telco manufacturer, right? They got in huge trouble with the US government because essentially they were selling phone systems that doubled as listening devices. That was a very well documented, fairly well organized effort on the part of the Chinese government. So I don't think you're crazy at all for domestic on
no. It's one of those times to I'll use a biking analogy and then we'll start to wrap up, but I like to bike. I'm in the Texas Hill Country. Back in Seattle, 32 years in Seattle, I had the full-on rain gear. You might imagine, right? And it's expensive, man. It's like ski clothing, and it breathes and it keeps you dry and all that. And I'd ride the ferry into Seattle, and there were just days where you'd see all of, maybe 100 bikers out of 2,000 people on the ferry. And we're like, it's like doctors putting on scrubs, right? It's like, man, we gotta button up, so to speak. Yep. And we're going into a storm. And that's kind of an analogy of where my emotional feelings are with cybersecurity right now.
There's so much technical debt. I mean, at the end of the day, technology moved so much faster than security. Our adoption of technology moved faster than security can keep up with. If you look at COVID's a perfect example of that. In March of 2022, the priority wasn't let's do this in a secure way and get people working from home and take, a couple of months to plan out VPN. It wasn't that. It was, I have 1,000 faculty that need to be able to teach next week. How do I get that done? And security got kind of thrown to the wayside. So, we're kind of dealing with the aftermath of that, but also, on a more macro scale, that's been a challenge that's been brewing for 30 years.
Yeah, yeah, it has. I concur. All right. Well, hey, Jenny, if you could get Aaron back next quarter, we'll get you back late in Q2 and check in with you on what's going on in the world, if you don't mind.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Harry. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.